Teachers, what was the most obvious teacher crush someone had on you? Story 1. I had a student who had a rough life. Mom pretty much abandoned him, and Grandma was raising him by pawning him off to family on the weekends. I knew he was going to have a rough life if someone didn't step in and let him know he mattered. He asked me one day how I would know if someone loved me. I jokingly replied that that person would bring me coffee in the morning. A few days later, he came into the gym with a huge smile and a cup of gas station coffee. He walked right up and handed it to me along with a bag of creamers and sugars. He said he didn't know how I liked my coffee, so he grabbed one of each. He saved his allowance and asked his grandma to leave for school early so he could stop by the gas station. The next year, he brought me a coffee mug so I could remember him when I drank my morning coffee. That kid will always have my heart. Story 2. Not a teacher, but I was accused of having a teacher crush on my math TA in college. I'm okay with math, but I have to put in a lot of practice and I go to office hours. I'm very visual and I really like to just watch math problems being done. I'm also very much a soundboard learner, and I talk myself through problems or talk with others through problems. My TA figured this out and he went out of his way to help me. It also just so happened that he was the TA for various math courses while I was in college, and I managed to get him as a TA for all but one of my math classes during my entire undergrad. My last class I had with him, I wrote him an absolute stellar review because he deserved it for helping me get through calc into linear algebra. That summer, I actually worked with him in a program where he taught math and I taught programming. I sat in on his first class, and he was telling his students he got this amazing review this past year, and yep, it was my review. I called him the Chuck Norris of TAs, and he quoted that line and others I used, so I know it was mine. I gasped and went, hey. I wrote that review, and I could see he was genuinely appreciative. I spent the time writing such a review, but then the whole class went, ooh, someone has a crush on the teacher. I was so embarrassed. Anyways, I had those freshmen for 8 a.m. introductory programming, and I made their quizzes extra hard compared to the other sections. The TA and I would drink grade papers with the other teachers, and man, even drunk, math majors still talk about math. Story 3. I have a little bit of a horror story. Now, it did not happen to me, but to a female colleague. There was this boy in her class who had a very big crush on her, and he was always talking to everyone about how he would marry her someday. She assumed he was joking, but eventually he very seriously asked her out. Obviously, she said no. So together with his friends, he stole a picture from one of her social media accounts and created a WhatsApp conversation between my colleague and himself. This conversation was very couple-like, and when they were done creating it, he showed it to principal. So of course she was called into the office, and luckily she was able to prove it was fake. Something with the last time she was online on WhatsApp. So long story short, she was almost fired because a student had a crush on her and couldn't handle a rejection. Story 4. Back in around 2004-05, I was teaching a 12th grade class. One of the more outgoing boys in the class would always write me notes and give them to me after class. All of these notes had pictures. On one of the last days of school, he drew a picture of a man on his knees proposing a woman. The people had arrows pointing to them, labeled me and you. I was taken aback, and just as I was about to say something, he left the classroom. The next day after classes ended, and I was working on grading some projects, he visited me in the classroom and pulled a box out of his pocket and then said, "Marry me." I refused, and he then proceeded to grab my wrist and started putting on his ring. I was shocked and quickly shouted, "Move away," with a "oh no." He put the box in his pocket and left the classroom. He was reported to the office and was never seen again. Story 5. A few years ago, a student in the building, not one of mine, would flirt in the most awkward way as he'd pass me in the hall. He'd say things like, "You look fairy, Mile High Club today." It happened enough that I went to the school counselor to ask for advice, which was uncomfortable enough, except that she was a bit past middle age and didn't understand what was wrong with the things he was saying, so I had to explain to her how his comments were overtly inappropriate. Ultimately, the counselor was a sweet lady, but she had no advice. I ended up just avoiding him until the end of the year. He was a high school senior. Story 6. I'm not a teacher, but I do have a story of when I was a HS student. It was my senior year, and I had a crush on this young history teacher. He would come on MUN trips with us as a chaperone, so he knew who I was. It was my birthday, and he heard from a different teacher across the hall. He said, "Happy birthday" to me, and my response was, "Thanks, I'm 18. I blurted it out very quickly and realized literally the second it left my mouth how inappropriate it was. His response, "Well, are you registered to vote?" Story 7. In the days of MSN, I got a chat invite from someone who had the same last name as me. I assumed it was a relation, but they didn't say anything, and so I left for a bit to eat. I came back and saw a couple more people had been added to the chat and saw they'd been talking about me. I realized they were students because they referred to me as Miss. They were teasing one of the others for his crush on me, and he was defending my long hair as hot. Story 8. A student who had a crush on me wrote a straightforward proposition and asked another teacher to deliver it to me. This teacher was a mentor of sorts to the student, so you'd think he'd do something wiser and more responsible than what he actually did, which was deliver the note and threaten me with some form of unspecified violence if I told anyone. So I informed the principal, and both the student and teacher were transferred to other schools. Story 9. Not a teacher, but a student. I was in a psych class in my senior year of high school and had an admittedly attractive male teacher for the class. We're in the library one day to work on a presentation project, and I go to the printer to pick something up. This girl, who was clearly a sophomore, career school, all sophomores in purple polos, asked if I was in the teacher's class, and I said yes. She then told me, "You know he's really cute, but I'd really like to marry him, but if you tell anyone, I'll kill you." I just got out of the printer room with my work as fast as possible and told the teacher, who was horrified. That girl had looked dead serious and terrifying when she said that, and while I was 17 at the time, I was still scared. Story 10. Not a teacher, a student. Back in middle school, which was 16 years ago, I had a crush on a teacher of mine, although I wasn't aware of the severity of it until it was too late. Around Halloween time, we were supposed to write a poem about a teacher of ours. I, of course, procrastinated until the night before and then realized that I lost the sheet with the contents of what the poem is supposed to be. All I knew was that it had to be about a teacher, so I chose my crush unbeknownst to me. The next day I show up to class and try and turn in my paper where I was informed by my teacher crush that we were going to be reading our poems in front of two classes, separated by a sliding wall half the time. As other students read theirs, I quickly realized these poems were supposed to be Halloween related. I panicked because mine didn't fit the criteria and had nothing to do with Halloween. It wasn't until I was reading mine aloud that I felt the sudden rushing moment of what I had just confessed to the entire two classes. Both teachers from either side of the wall and the entire student body watched in stupefy horror as I read it aloud, voice and hands shaking. Too late to turn back. It went like this to start. Mr. Hopper, I have a dog named Copper. Mr. Hopper, you make my eyes popper. I don't remember the rest. When I finally looked at Mr. Hopper, his entire face and neck was red with embarrassment. We never spoke of it ever, and I avoided him like the plague. I'm sure it was the same around. Story 11. I taught grade 7 and one kid in particular took a liking to me. It wasn't a crush per se. It came across more as an elementary school fascination with the teacher. He would raise his hand constantly during class to answer questions, and when students were doing work he would raise his hand constantly to ask me random questions about my life. He had a few favorite questions like, "What song is stuck in your head right now?" Or, "What's your fiancé's name?" One time he very excitedly told me he had seen me at Costco, and I hadn't been to Costco that week, so he clearly was seeing me in places I wasn't. Story 12. Back when I was teaching preschool, 3-year-olds don't do subtle things. He always wanted to hold my hand when we went on walks, to sit next to me at circle time, and just to look at me with puppy eyes. It was adorable, but at the same time, it was a relief when he grew out of it. Years later, I was teaching an all-boy class at a vocational high school, and was lucky enough to get a bright new teacher on a Comenius exchange to co-teach the class with me. She was also quite attractive, and the boys reacted. Since it was an English language class, I got a kick out of doing my best Mary Poppins impression. "Close your mouth, please, we are not codfish." Story 13. When I was student teaching, a student very badly photoshopped a picture of his head onto my profile picture from social media, which had me and my now husband together. He posted it to his social media saying me and my new girlfriend, Miss Pretty. Another student asked me to prom and gave me a rose. Hard no. I laughed it off, but I was actually super nervous. I was going to get in trouble even though I hadn't done anything wrong. Last year, a student called me the cutie teacher in front of his friends. I don't think he had a crush on me though. I think he was trying to get a rise out of me. It worked. I called his super strict mom immediately. Story 14. Not a teacher, but this one girl had such a blatantly huge crush on my film studies teacher when we were 15, 16. She herself was mixed race and would ask the poor guy if he preferred white chocolate, dark chocolate, or caramel with a wink. Safe to say that was awkward for everyone present in the room. Story 15. I teach in a small program at a local university, so I've become friends with many of my students over the years, or at least gotten to know them pretty well. I've had students of all genders openly admit to having a crush on me, tell me other students have a crush on me, flirt openly, text flirt, even had a couple students fighting with each other on who could flirt more or win more of my attention. Some of it was kind of funny and lighthearted, some of it was not. Story 16. This is a story from when I was a student. There was a younger teacher that a bunch of girls had a crush on. One discovered where he lived and confessed to the other students that she kept driving around the block because he was doing yard work without a shirt on. The same teacher later got engaged, and multiple girls were crying in the halls that day when they found out. Story 17. I taught pre-K, and one student always wanted to be around me and would pretend to slip up and call me mom. He saw my phone had a screensaver of me and my at-the-time boyfriend, and he got all mad and said I should break up with him. Kids are adorable. I doubt it'll remember me in a few years. Story 18. I started teaching high school English at 21 in the early 90s. A very religious student wrote me an anonymous letter explaining that she believed that God had put her in my class because we were meant to be together. Figured it out by handwriting, reported it. It was the last days of the school year before she graduated, so I don't think I ever had to deal with her being in my class again because of finals or something. Story 19. I teach swimming lessons. We start each class by holding hands in a circle and singing a song. There was one boy who somehow always managed to hold one of my hands instead of other students. He managed to hold my hand so tightly it hurt, and when the song was over he wouldn't let go. He was 15. Story 20. I taught preschool, and the owner's grandson would tell everyone we were going to get married once he was done with first grade. He even gave me mittens with hearts on them, because hearts are for love. He's in middle school now, and doesn't remember me. That's a wrap for this video. Make sure to leave your relatable story down in the comments. I would love to make a video on them. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time.